Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Pete Denby, co-founder of HyperFinity, the decision intelligence platform for retail. This is To Affinity and Beyond, our podcast about decision intelligence, data science and AI, with a particular focus on all things retail. Today we're exploring demand forecasting, which is widely regarded as an imperative for retailers to get right in order to run a successful business. And I'm joined once again by my HyperFinity co-founder and our Chief Customer Officer, Thomas Hill. So Tom, how are you today?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Pete. I've been enjoying the beautiful skies over the last few days with lovely sunsets and snow moons and driving into work with the silhouette of the trees against the skyline. So that's my highlight of the last couple of days.
Super duper. And what's a snow moon?
Snow moon, it's the full moon of this time of year, isn't it?
All right, I don't know. I don't know. I've learned something.
Neither did I until the news told me 2 days ago.
Thought you were going to say one of the kids brought it home from school. a piece of knowledge for you. That's where I learn a lot of my facts through the kids at primary school.
Yeah, I generally learned about worms and soil yesterday from the kids, so that's less exciting.
Yeah, beautiful skies though. We both live on the west coast of the UK, and the skies are absolutely gorgeous this time of year. So I fully agree with you. Let's get into it. So we're going to start with a couple of definitions. And according to Wikipedia, demand forecasting is the process of making future estimations in relation to customer demand over a specific period. And according to the fantastically named global fulfillment software provider ShipBob, demand forecasting is the process of using predictive analytics based on historical data to estimate and predict future demand for a product or service. Now, rather predictably, Amazon is a clear leader when it comes to demand forecasting. The retail giant uses machine learning to predict demand for millions of products in their portfolio, a feat that wouldn't be possible for human brain power alone. And according to Forbes, Amazon prioritized AI-driven predictive forecasting to quickly respond to unexpected demand signals, like a surge in demand for toilet paper during the COVID-19 pandemic. And demand forecasting has been an issue for a while, actually. So it was an issue even before the pandemic. Research by IHL Group in 2015 found that forecasting issues like overstocks or out of stocks cost retailers $1.1 trillion globally in lost revenue. So no trivial matter at all. So Tom, coming back to you, why is demand forecasting so important to retailers right now?
Well, I think it's in essence the heart of everything that they need to deliver accurately for profitability. I think it's the biggest single impact on profitability when it's done wrong. So when you have products that are too much availability, filling the warehouse, or not enough stock and losing out on sales, in essence, the two biggest reasons as to why you can't deliver profitability or demand into the business.
Okay, and so can you just dig into those a little bit more then? Just a little bit more explanation about why they impact profitability so much.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about CP. We'll start off with food and CPG because it's an industry that we all know well. We all buy food week in, week out. And I think a lot of us will have been experiencing over the last few months supply chain challenges. I go into Tesco quite a lot at the minute, and I can never get fresh fruit and veg that I really want for the boys. So raspberries are always a challenge for me. Strawberries every now and again, and ultimately, if they're not on the shelf, I can't buy them. And when I worked at Asda, one of the trading directors always used to say to me, "It's better to look at a product on the shelf than to look at a customer not buying it," which was always around have too much availability rather than not enough. But on the flip to that, there's obviously waste, especially in consumables and products that obviously spoil. So within that space, you have too much availability and you're throwing a load of stuff away at the end of the day. And food waste is a real challenge for that industry, and not what any of them want. So get that balance right, and that's how you make sure that when a consumer wants a product, it's there on the shelf, and then ultimately to fulfill demand. And the perfect Elysium to this is the last person at the end of the day walks into Tesco and goes, "I want that last packet of raspberries, please." They pick them up and there's zero waste, 100% availability, and your forecast is absolutely perfect. The reality to that situation and current supply chain issues means that forecasting has been really, really difficult in that industry, and I think in all industries. in order to manage that balance of making sure that the product is there when the consumer wants to buy it. Sizes of clothes in fashion is relevant to that as well. The amount of times that you want to go and buy something and there's products available but never in your size, it's the same challenge. And also when you've got that ability to then not have it warehoused or wasted in terms of meeting that demand is ultimately what success looks like.
Yeah. And do you feel that the ability of retailers to forecast demand accurately, has that got a lot worse, would you say, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Absolutely, yes. Mainly due to supply chain challenges. And it's not just COVID, it's Brexit, it's Ukraine. There are many factors, macro factors that are affecting supply chains at the minute, causing cost price increases, causing challenges to the supply chain, actually getting product on the shelf when people need and want it. That's one element to it. The second one is, I think some industries are changing. Within fashion, we're now seeing micro trends around products, and somebody puts something out on TikTok and all of a sudden there's mass demand for a certain style of dress that you just couldn't have predicted previously. What used to happen is people would look at the catwalks, the fashion buyers would go out there, look at the trends that are coming, buy to those trends, and when they get met, they're almost dictated by the people that want you to buy them. Now an influencer comes on, says something about a specific product, and that product can sell out in hours in the store, but similar type products can start selling out really, really quickly. The challenge there becomes understanding those signals and real-time demand a lot faster to make sure that you're able to manage margins. Really, in that instance, you're always going to sell the product out, but there's opportunity to think about what margin you sell that product at to protect and to just delay that demand curve a little bit, so you sell out in 3 days instead of 3 hours, and you can make a lot more cash aligned to that. So I think there are some macro challenges that can't really be fixed in the short term. Where are the boats? Have they got the products on that we need, and can we get them? But what you can do is where you can get product, is you can optimize and understand the signals better and collect more data points in terms of how you're going to sell those products through. And I think all those social trends being a great example of that, understanding actual demand, so alerting and real-time demand and sell-through curves need to be done on a hourly basis as opposed to a daily or weekly basis, which they can be. And also things around understanding exactly what products I'm promoting, when I'm promoting them, how that's impacting all of that demand, and adjusting my promotions in line with those multiple signals that we now have will enable people to manage that supply chain better. So I think it's not just around forecasting demand right now. It's about managing your supply chain that you've got to work with, and people can do that better as well.
Okay, cool. And we'll come on to talk about the traditional way of forecasting demand, and then we'll we'll offer an alternative, what we think might be a better way to do it. But just coming back to your, I guess, the customer experience of experiencing out of stocks. It really is quite frustrating, I must say. I don't have stats to hand on this, but I'm guessing that out of stock products are a leading factor in people choosing not to shop with a retailer, either on that particular visit or full stop. I think one of the most frustrating things is when you're shopping online, maybe shopping for clothes or furniture or whatever online, and the product is advertised as being available in your size. You go through to the website to buy it and it's not there. It is a seriously frustrating moment, and I think very off-putting for customers. But then more in a grocery setting, Tom, which I think you were kind of referring to, I think it's a very tough situation for grocery retailers to get right, striking this balance between being able to sell through all the product but having products available for when customers want to buy them. Very difficult balance. And of course, with sustainability being really to the fore now, the sustainability agenda and the need to kind of protect the environment as well as protect profits, there's an increased focus on getting demand forecasting right, so that you fulfill customer demand, but also you're not left with tons of products on the shelf that go unused and go to waste. So I think it's coming to much sharper focus, the need to forecast demand. I think, and just coming back to
Just to come
Sorry, go
back
ahead.
on that, Pete. The other thing that's definitely true right now around certainly the size issue that you mentioned there, and things that you want to buy but don't have it in your size within fashion. There's so much wasted media spend out there. It's still stacked in Google's favor that they're sending clicks to your website. But if that product is only available in 2 sizes, then don't be showing that product on Google, because ultimately direct your customers to that product on your website. Don't be paying media for it and putting cost into your business for products that aren't going to convert. So understanding your conversion at a size level for fashion and understanding how much traffic you're sending that through is something that's really not done well in my experience. So we'll kind of say we'll come on to how people are doing these forecasting, but there are lots of things that can be done better, and the way that we think that you can actually build in intelligence and signals into those forecasts to improve both customer experience and margin through to availability.
Absolutely. And just one other point I wanted to touch on was just about kind of creating and a way to kind of flip it. So some retailers, particularly fashion retailers, have kind of flipped it. So they have limited runs on new products. So I think the one bit that's really tricky to do is to forecast demand for something that becomes a trend, or a social media sensation, because you really don't know that that's going to happen. So it's very, very difficult to be able to deal with that. And I think you just have to, sometimes accept that sometimes you have to be reactive, but that's a minority of the time. The majority that you can have more control over. But some fashion retailers, so End, for example, who are a fashion retailer, particularly for men's, kind of hipster fashion online, but with a few physical shops as well. So they are kind of famous for doing limited runs on new models of trainers, and they deliberately kind of create FOMO by having these limited runs, and you pay an extortionate amount for this pair of trainers, which is highly fashionable and desirable, but it is a limited run. So when it's gone, and you accept the fact that if you can't get hold of that pair of trainers, then so be it. You'll probably go and hunt them down on the used market, eBay, or some of the other markets out there, and pay even more for said pair of trainers. But that's a way of flipping it. But I think that only really works in a fashion environment. I don't think that works in the majority of retail cases, so not something that could be widely adopted. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the traditional way of forecasting demand, and then we'll move on to what a better way might look like. So can you talk us through, Tom, what the how a retailer would traditionally look to forecast demand, particularly kind of pre-pandemic?
Yeah, of course. So it tends to be quite simplistic in its approach, and ultimately it's 4 key foundations to any supply chain forecast. So one tends to be time series analysis of historical trends, certainly for continual lines. So in CPG and milk, for example, within a grocery retailer, you know how much milk you sell on an average week. You know what you were doing this time last year and whether the sales of milk increases or decreases at this time of year. And you can make a projection for the future based on that. So that time series analysis is one element to supply chain forecasting, is always going to be part of those calculations. Overlaid with that, and something that some retailers do and others don't, is customer forecasting, customer-led forecasting, which tends to be more activity-led. So there's a marketing activity that's then built into these things. Are we promoting this product? On what channels are we promoting this product? What offers are we putting behind that product? And that obviously increases and amplifies your forecast that you would expect to get, because you're looking to drive sales and increase volume through that. So the second part is, what's my activity that I'm putting against the product, certainly from a media perspective. Then you build into promotional plans. Where am I buying to a promotion? So am I actually buying a lot of this product for a promotional cycle, whether it's Easter, Christmas, or just sale, whatever that might be. So that then gets baked into those forecasts. And the final one, which is around the back to that customer piece, which some retailers are doing, but I don't think enough are doing, which is that now not just thinking about that time series forecast where you look at a product. Let's look at customers' interactions with products. What's the trend of customers and their consumption of these products? And how does that look within any given week? month or year, and then to be thinking about when is that customer going to be coming back to purchase again. So purchase cycles are really important. So within coffee and coffee shops, you've got a very regular cycle of buyers that will be in every single weekday to buy their coffee in the morning. That might be one type of consumer, and you can very well predict that unless they're on holiday next week, they're going to be in every single day next week buying their favorite coffee, doing what they do. So overlaying that customer element to things, which works not just on regular purchases like food and things like that. It also works within areas which are less regular. So is this an event at a certain point in the year? So is it a birthday and I'm in a gifting moment? And do I normally gift from a jeweler or chocolates or whatever that product might be? That is still looking at the consumer lens to say this consumer is going to be in the market at this specific point of time, to overlay that. So that fourth pillar, so you've got all the first three were product. What's the historical sales and trends of that product? What's the activity that we're planning from a media and marketing perspective against that product? When are we promoting that product? Are you changing the price and upweighting that?
Yeah.
The final bit really is where I think a lot of people don't do this, and we'll come on to other ways and other reasons as to why customers should form part of forecasting. Is that understanding customer buying patterns and trends and incorporating that to understand how demand will change based on consumer behaviours. We saw a lot of this during COVID, really interestingly, within supporting a grocer with their supply chain forecasts. And ultimately what happened is all of their existing historical time series forecasting didn't work after COVID because everyone's behaviour changed. But at a store level, it was ruined. And we tried to understand why it was ruined and help them through that by adding in customer data. And the customer data that we built in was who's shopping in these stores at this time of year and what are their buying patterns. So who are they and why are they shopping? And what we found is the stores that were massively overstocked and were creating horrific wastage were the holiday location stores, where holiday makers during COVID will have traditionally gone to those stores and bought up a load of product that weren't there. And so understanding that they were infrequent, low loyalty to those stores, customers, and understanding that you've lost all of those customers, but your existing frequent, regular, high-value customers are now shopping those stores even more and looking at the different products that those customers are buying, because the holiday mission is a very different one to your everyday, your every week missions. That is a great example of where customer data in conjunction with time series helps fix the challenge of those sort of different and disruptive spikes in demand.
Okay, so you can see some challenges with the traditional methods, particularly when we go through something like COVID, when buying patterns change, certainly pre and post pandemic, but pre and during pandemic. Obviously, there was a huge difference, but also pre and post pandemic as well, in that people's behaviours have changed slightly. So a different approach is needed. So could you maybe elaborate on what a new approach looks like, or how a more kind of all-encompassing view of customer behaviour and wider commercial retail decisions might be taken into account to better forecast demand?
Yeah, so the first statement that I think I'll make is that you should not be forecasting products but customer needs. That is the first element to this, and I think everyone tends to start from product. How much of this product am I going to sell? But within any retailer, you have a set of competing products that are all meeting the same customer need. And that's the first thing that we can put into the forecast that can help retailers and brands make better forecasting decisions. I'll give you an example of that. I'll get away from food and fashion, which we always seem to talk about. We'll go into holidays. And the example from holidays that, again, we were having good discussions around this. But working with a travel company around better pricing hotels and holidays and how we would do that. And the first decision was, well, can you build us a pricing engine which helps us sell through our hotel stock, because it's bought, it's procured, and if we don't fill those hotels, we have to pay for them anyway. So the whole premise was we have a stock challenge. So it's the same as having food on the shelf or clothes in a warehouse. We have a stock challenge and we need to sell that stock through. And the question to us was, can you build us a dynamic pricing engine which will help price those hotels so we sell through? But when we got into it and we said, well, okay, how do you currently price them? Well, person A looks after Turkey, person B looks after Tenerife, was how we went into it. So that's how they're currently priced. So what we'll need is the decision engine to understand how they do it, to incorporate a load of those factors, but really to have earlier signals earlier on in the season as to where we need to start reducing prices for hotels, so we're not giving too much away in the really margin hitting sort of late holiday booking period. And we say, well, that's fine, but as you move towards that late period, if you're changing the price of holidays in Tenerife, don't you think that would affect the demand of the hotels in Turkey? And the response was, well, yeah, but that's quite difficult for a person to manage. It's like, it is, but it's not difficult for a computer to manage.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we did in support of that challenge is to think about customer needs. And when you start to put hotels not in terms of their location, which is how they were currently organised, and then some of the attributes against those hotels, does it have a pool? Is it near to the beach? Is it 5-star? Is it 2-star? When you start to think and put them as to how do customers browse the website and trade those hotels off against each other, when in a lates market actually it has a pool or not, I don't actually care. I want a really cheap 2-star hotel that's near a beach, and I'm willing to consider any location that's going to be hot. How do you put those hotels together in terms of what the customer need is? And when you understand that customer need, you group those hotels into a different mindset. And that is across Tenerife, Turkey, Cyprus, Spain, all of those sort of short haul late markets. What you then have is a load of competing hotels which consumers would consider separately. And this is the important thing now, is when you start to change the price of some of those hotels, you will affect the demand of the other hotels. And so it's not just a price decision on one hotel, it's a price decision on potentially 10 hotels.
Yeah.
And once you understand that and you understand those interactions, you can then better price all of those 10 hotels, so you sell through the right amount of all of them to maximize ultimately the occupancy at the end of it. And that is a key principle that is relevant to everything. I'll come back to fashion because I'm very comfortable talking about it. But within fashion, I'll talk about Next again. They have created loads of supplier integration, concessions, bringing marketplace, bringing other people's products onto their website. But what I now have, instead of 5 pair of own brand black trousers when I'm looking for them with slightly different fits, I now have 50 pairs of black trousers, all of different brands, different types, different shapes, different sizes, styles, sorry. And once you have that, what you in essence have is a potential need state that's gone from 5 products to, let's say, 500 products in some instances, because that is a reality of it.
Yeah.
And understanding that, well, I've still got 5 core own brand products that I am forecasting my supply chain on. And I'm forecasting them based on my historical sales before my site was a marketplace. What we now have are competing products that I keep loading onto our website that are taking demand away from those products that I've put on. And ultimately, if I'm Next, I want to be selling more of my own brand, more margin rich product rather than taking a cut of everybody else's product.
Yeah.
So that's another great example of, once you understand how demand is transferring, the substitutability of those products, which products are refined, which products customers buy together, which products compete for the same customer need. What you then can do is incorporate demand transference. So the first part is, don't forecast products, forecast customer needs. Understand the products that meet those customer needs, and then incorporate demand transference into your supply chain forecasting. So the final thing I'll say on that within food. So food is a great example where you might got 10 bottles of even just Heinz tomato ketchup on the same shelf. If I promote one of those bottles, I can tell you right now, all of the others won't sell, and that won't work. That is a great example of how do you make sure that you understand those competing missions and needs, and make sure that you then buy and you have the stock sorted of the other sizes, the other brands, the other products, to make sure that you're not overstocked in those as you're selling through one line on lots of promo.
Yeah, absolutely. And what stops retailers from taking that approach, which seems, completely sensible? The way you've explained it seems like a fantastic way to approach the problem. But what would stop a retailer from actually kind of heeding that advice?
From my experience, the main one is the access to customer data. So customer data at the heart of decision making across range, supply, so assortment. What product should I have in the first place? Should I have 500 pairs of trousers, or actually will 50 do it? Through to then, okay, of those products that we now know are competing, but we think that meet slightly different needs for the customer, how much of them should we buy? You need access to that customer data to understand that substitutability.
Yeah.
And historically, and what we find is supply chain forecasting tends to look at product sales and often doesn't have the customer data with access to them, which is one of the fundamental things that we designed within HyperFinity immediately was the fact that customer data should be the core, and understanding customers' interactions with products interactions with each other to then serve marketing personalization decisions, supply chain forecasts, assortment decisions, and price decisions, because as we've kind of given from that hotel example, they're all linked. And that's a great example of where supply, price, range, in terms of what hotels should have in the first place, all linked to that customer data piece. So I think it's access to customer data in the main, and all historical supply chain tools really are mainly geared around time series data.
Yeah.
So there has to be a slight pivot in terms of how things are done to make sure that it incorporates that customer data.
Yeah, and I think also accessibility. There's access to customer data, but who you give that access to as well, making sure tools are available for people who are actually making these decisions, who are tasked with making the decision, all sorts of the decisions you've talked about, actually, because it's not just supply chain, it's not just getting a product on the shelf, it's everything around that as well. I think what you've just referred to is a set of commercial decisions which ultimately impact whether a customer is going to buy a product and whether the retailer is going to be successful. So it's not only getting the product on the shelf, but it's also, how you price and promote that product, how you market it, which has an impact on demand. So would you say there's a case for kind of unification of insight and decisions across a retail business so that they can make that set of commercial decisions more effectively, and maybe an organizational piece there as well? So breaking down the barriers, breaking through those silos of insight and decision making. If there was a way to consider a set of decisions with a customer at the core, perhaps that would be a better way to achieve some of the aims that a retailer would have.
Well, you just summed it up perfectly in your last statement. Putting customer data at the heart of decision making is how retailers will make better decisions. And the access to that is really, really tricky. But ultimately, syndicating that and making sure you serve it to the decision makers in a way that they can consume it and make better decisions is the answer to this. And you also made a point which I was going to come on to, but we'll pick it up. Ultimately, that data needs to be in the hands of the decision makers. So the buyers that are responsible for looking into the future, looking at their weekly sales, looking at their trade data. Am I above or behind my forecast? Why? What do I need to do about it? And it's at that point that data and customer data can really help them make intelligent decisions. Is this product price sensitive? Am I overstocked or understocked? And if the answer to that is it is price sensitive and I'm massively overstocked, I might want to promote that as a trader, as a merchandiser, as a buyer. And because I'm responsible for my P&L and selling through my stock.
Yeah.
That data needs to be available. Now, the price sensitivity piece is customer data. The next decision is, well, what other products do I have in my assortment that are going to get affected by that? Tell me what's going to happen to that demand. Do I need to adjust my buys of those products? Do I need to tailor them down a little bit because I'm going on a heavyweight promotion on a product that I really need to sell through? That data needs to be available, but in a really simple, consumable way.
Yeah.
So that access to that data for the decision maker is really, really critical. But giving them access to customer data, which I think is something that, for me, a centralized intelligence team should be responsible for providing the data and the capability, but then they need to put it in the hands of the decision maker so that they can execute on the back of it. And that's a successful model to making that work.
Yeah, and doing that in a way that they're comfortable with. So a lot of people get scared stiff when you say data, put the data in the hands of a trader, for example. But what we're not talking about here is asking a trader to become a superstar data scientist, are we? We're talking about giving them information, giving them insight in a really consumable fashion that allows them to make a better decision. So and that could take various forms. It could be visualizations, it could be tables of data. It's whatever works for the individual. And I think what we're also not talking about here is complete automation of an insight and decision making process. Lots of stuff in the press about AI and the power of this. Some of the new AI tools coming to market, like ChatGPT and Jasper, which is a marketing led kind of AI, and who knows what the future holds. But what we're talking about here is using data, creating insight, and giving tools to the people responsible for making decisions in retail businesses to make a better decision. So it's arming them with the data and the insight that they need. It's not replacing them. It's giving them tools to do, to use all the expertise they've built up of many years working in the retail industry, but giving them the tools to make an even better decision. I think that's the kind of logical progression in this area.
And we've discussed this on previous podcasts, but this is absolutely true. A trading function do not want to be told what to do. You tell them what to do and they'll go, no, it's wrong. I'll tell you all the reasons why you're wrong. Your data hasn't incorporated this trend that's going to happen on the catwalks in 6 months' time. And you've got no way of knowing that that's going to be the big thing. This material is the next greatest thing. I've got a supplier who I've got 10 different arrangements with for promotions. So I can't put that promotion on that your data's telling me to. It doesn't work. It fails. So as soon as there are a million reasons as to why data automation within supply chain isn't possible. Now it is in some instances, but not in most, I would say. What needs to happen is you need to empower the trader to help their decisions be better. Let them put their art to the science. We talk about that because they all say, I need more data. Yeah, so they want the data to help them make decisions, but they don't want the data to tell them what to do. And that is a fine balance. That's what we call decision intelligence, which is serve the information to me in a way that helps me trade my category better and make better decisions. But let me override it because it'll be wrong, and it will be wrong. There will be a recommendation to reduce the price of a product because it's overstocked and you need to sell it through. But you might have a supplier relationship in place which says, I can't shift that product because I'm establishing it at a price for a promotion that I'm running in 6 months' time. There's a good example, right? So you can't change it. So the trader would go, no, but this one, yes. That's absolutely the right thing for me to do, and that's helped me. But in a simple way that's quick to execute, gives the data and the insight in a way that they can consume it to go, I see why you're recommending that price change. And I understand it and I agree with it, or I don't. You have to see the information in an easy way to consume. And then the final thing is you have to give them ultimate control as to whether they do or don't. And that's the key thing for me. And there are loads of data, the key data points to do that. We'll come on to a little bit around managing supply. So when your forecast is set and you're trading against it, there's definitely an element now around those micro trends and thinking about when you do see a spike in demand, how do you manage it effectively? That needs more real-time pricing and pricing decisions to do that. But the main thing is what are the data points that help you do that? And what are the other things that are important? And a key one is, so for an online or multi-channel retailer, am I getting lots of visits to this product and is it converting? Because if I'm getting shed loads of visits, but no one's buying it, I've got a problem and I need to investigate that product as to what the problem is. And that problem could be availability of size. We'll come on to that in a minute. It could also be price. I'm just massively overpriced versus the market. So I'm wasting a load of media spend pushing people to look at this product. People want it, but they're just going again because it's just not competitive in terms of where I priced it. The next thing, customer data. Well, is that product price sensitive? And is that category price sensitive? If the answer is yes, then you need to move your price, otherwise you won't shift it. If the answer is no, well, actually, you might need to think about to do something different with that product, because price alone isn't going to shift it. And it might be something around quality, imagery. So the image might be just really poor of it. So people can't really see what they're getting. It might be some bad reviews, whatever that is. But it's root cause, and it enables a trader to make decisions. But it's some data points to do that. Visits, conversion, price elasticity. Put margin on top of that to think about whether I'd want to move the price. You're getting into decision intelligence, and they're some of the core, and I won't go into all of them, but some of the core measures that go into our pricing decision intelligence framework, which enables buyers and merchants to look at weekly trading and make decisions based on those factors.
Okay. All right, good stuff. And if if you kind of got a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 is fantastic, doing this brilliantly, using data to kind of drive our demand forecasting, and maybe Amazon is at a 10. That's usually the company that's heralded as the best in the business at this kind of thing. Where do most retailers sit?
That's a tough question. I think retailers that have regular consumable products, it is kind of 7, 8. It can still be done better. And I think the disruption of supply chain, the disruption of product interaction, having the signals. I think what those retailers don't do well is capture promotions and tag products. So what they do well is they look at product trends over time and category trends, but actually tagging products that are being promoted at what time, being able to go back and look at what the impact was on demand when that product was promoted, and to forecast future demand when I'm promoting the product again, and having a calendar in place which says this product is going to be promoted at this point. That's where they fall down. When you get into more discretionary purchases, so fashion, home, those types of areas, I think it's around a 3 to 5, because people just aren't looking at their assortment in a customer-centric way and understanding the interactions between products. There's been way too much supplier integration. Pack it onto the site and it will sell. And it does. It creates more demand overall. But what it does do is it massively affects the demand of any warehouse stock that you've got, because you're selling other people's stuff and you're making money out of that, and you're not taking the warehouse cost from it if it's direct dispatch. But what you are doing is you're affecting your own supply chain. And I think people need to get a grip on that quickly, and to start thinking about what's the right level of supplier integration that we should have to make sure that we maintain an efficient supply chain in our product, and we benefit from the increased sales and revenue that we get from incorporating other brands and retailers' products onto our website.
Okay, good. So, I mean, it's an opportunity then, but basically an opportunity to gain competitive advantage for those who get this right. And in a world where it's pretty tough, but pretty brutal industry, it's quite difficult to get a competitive advantage. But you could literally use data and use insight to generate a competitive advantage over other retailers in the field, which can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I'd say it's the biggest opportunity for any retailer right now, because it's one of the biggest challenges. Supply chain and pricing are what everybody is experiencing issues with. So for me, it's biggest. The other one is media that I just put in there. I think thinking about that customer data in the same way, and I know this podcast isn't about media, but leveraging first-party data within media to make more intelligent decisions, not wasting my spend on unavailable products that aren't converting, or we haven't got the right sizes for. That are out of stock, which you still see way too much of. But just get your stock feeds right to your ad platforms. Blimey, it's not hard, that one, is it? But a lot of people seem to be finding it hard. And yeah, I think that them for me, absolutely some massive opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. And we will touch on media in a future podcast episode, because it's it's a huge opportunity for retailers, but also there's so many problems that could be fixed, some easier than others, so we'll focus on that in detail in another episode. So anything else to add, Tom? Any other kind of major factors that a retailer would need to take into account to get demand forecasting right?
Yeah, so the second point I think I'll make a statement of is understand availability correctly. That is a fundamental that I think a lot of people don't do. And I'm thinking about, I see way too many retailers saying, well, I've got good visits to this product, and I've got it in stock, and I've got good availability of it, so I've got stock of that product. then therefore it's available. I'm like, it's available in one size. So you might have that product, it's available in one size. So I think genuine understanding of availability is really important. Understanding failure states, it's dead easy this. It's looking at who's viewing the products and who's buying them and who's not buying them. What were they trying to buy, and understanding that. So failure states is really important, and to think about that for availability. And the final one, this is dead easy, by the way, fragmented stock. Understanding fragmented stock and having those signals against products. So if I have a dress and it's available from size 8 to size 20, and I've got loads of availability 16 to 20 and a load of availability size 8 and nothing in between, yeah, you need to understand that, because if you're looking at that grouped product and saying, I've got good availability on this dress, you've not. That is fragmented, and your pricing decision that you'd make on that is entirely different to a solid stocked product in all sizes through to a sort of like a poorly stocked product across all sizes. If I'm selling above my demand, you put your price up. Yeah, you can make more money and more margin out of those products because they are going to sell out. If I'm selling below my expected demand, I'm going to have waste, or I'm going to have way too much fat in my supply chain and in the warehouse at the end of the season. So I've got to clear this product through. But if that product's fragmented, really, it's a clearance decision. It's not a price up or a price down decision. It's a clearance decision, because the people are coming and they don't want the sizes that you've got. But I see way too many retailers that go, I've got availability in that product. No, you've not. You've got a massive fragmented stock issue. So understand availability accurately is critical, and what people aren't doing. And that again is easy. So you need to just make sure that your products are tagged at size level and grouped up to a sort of grouped product ID, which says this is the dress. We need to understand the stock levels of each of those sizes, and we need to understand the demand against those sizes. That's the hard bit, and that's why people don't do this very well. But that's where all of your web data can easily be incorporated to understand, am I getting lots of visits? Am I seeing conversion? And when I look at my size profile or color profile, whatever the variants are of that product, am I understanding whether it's fragmented or it's available across all lines and I'm just not selling it? That's a very different decision. Because if that's the case, again, you look into the product. Is the imagery good? So I'm getting visits and not conversions. Is the imagery okay? Do people trust the quality? So on and so forth. And then the final bit, if I'm selling behind the curve, if it's price sensitive and everything looks great apart from the fact that my price might be out, promote it. And again, serving that data all in a way that enables merchandiser, trader to look at it and go, I can diagnose the problem with this product. It's fragmented, it's overstocked, it's understocked, it needs promoting, it needs clearing, is something where decision intelligence can really help. So that second point, and I'll continue to labour it, is understand availability accurately is really critical to forecasting.
Yeah, so I can, as you're talking through that kind of diagnostic is really important to understand what the challenge is, but then going further than that. So what should we do about it to repair the situation? But looking at that through multiple lenses, but particularly from through the kind of customer lens, which is an interesting conversation again, probably for another time, about some of the differences between analytical techniques and disciplines out there, AI being fantastically powerful but automated and very black box, so particularly know what's happening behind the algorithm. BI, business intelligence, being good for producing kind of graphs and charts on what's going on, but not very instructive. You don't really know what to do next. Decision intelligence kind of marrying the two. So having the power of those AI models, the visualization element of BI, but then also an instructional element as well about this is what we think you should do to resolve the situation. And I'm sure we'll have future podcasts that go into great depth about decision intelligence and how that differs from the likes of AI and BI.
Yeah, and so my third point. So forecast need states, not products.
Yeah.
Understand availability accurately, and the final one is data in the hands of decision makers. That is your decision intelligence point that you've just made, and that is critical. So there are two things at play that we can help retailers with on that front. One is make sure you're collecting the right data. So you've got to have the right signal tags against all of your products to make sure that you can do this accurately. Quite simply, the amount of people that don't just tag promotions in a way that enables you to see when was demand affected by an actual promotion. We have techniques and ways to go, well, we know there's a price change, but we don't know if that was backed by media or not. So having that information is really, really critical. So tagging your data and having the right information against the product to enable you to forecast that better. But then the final bit is then serving that data and that customer-centric view of the data to the decision maker in the platform that you just talked about, which guides a decision, doesn't make the decision necessarily, but it guides a decision and surfaces the information in a way that makes it easy to make that decision and see where the value might lie is the final thing. And that's what's critical. And the easiest sell, the hardest sell we ever have with a trader is like, here's a machine and it can help you tell how you price your products. I know how to price my products. I get that, but it can help. The one that they always love, because you kind of go, don't tell me to put prices down because it hits my margin. But when we go, you can put the prices of all these products up and then you can make more money and you'll still sell it. Then they go, oh yeah, I'm interested in that. Like, so straight away, if you tell me 10 products that I can put up this week and that's not going to impact my demand negatively, then that's when you get real buy-in. And that's the reality of an opportunity that some retailers might not like because there are price credentials and value credentials that you have to protect. But ultimately, a lot of retailers right now will be saying, if I've got real high demand for a product and I can make a little bit more margin out of it, that's the good thing with the supply chain and cost price challenges that everyone's experiencing.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, any final points before we wrap up?
I think I've done them. They're my three. Shall I say them again?
Yeah, please do.
Forecast customer need states, not product demand. Understand availability accurately and put this customer data in the heart of in the hands of the decision maker. Oh, I didn't nail those three, but you got the gist.
We got the gist. And also, if you've been following the show, you'll see that we also produce a blog off the back of these podcasts. So we'll summarize the key points and any kind of reference links that are particularly important in that blog. So keep an eye out for that as well. So forecasting demand, clearly really important topic. It's going to become more and more important as the years go by. Tom, thank you very much for your time and for great insight on the episode again. Much appreciated. And we look forward to welcoming everybody next time. If you would like to, if you enjoyed the episode, please go ahead and subscribe via your favorite podcast platform. Give it a rating, 5-star, always appreciated. Tell a colleague or send us your feedback to Peter Denby at HyperFinity.ai. Thanks for listening and join us again next time. Thanks.